Hi, this is Teddy. You're listening to Nicole Hobbs with Every District on Two Broad Talking Politics. Bye!
Are you listening?
Hi everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I am on today with Nicole Hobbs, who is the Executive Director of EveryDistrict. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So could you start by telling us just a little bit about what EveryDistrict is?
So at EveryDistrict, our focus is exclusively on the states and working with Democratic candidates running in competitive state legislative districts. And we have two main lines of work that we do to support that mission. So the first is identifying where the competitive districts are. So if you go on our website, everydistrict.us, you'll see our map where we have given all 7,383 state legislative seats across the country a competitiveness score. And then we use that information to figure out where Democrats can actually flip state legislative chambers. And we endorse candidates running in competitive districts and provide them with fundraising support.
All right. And so I want to dive a whole lot more into what all of that means. But I'd also like to know how this got started and what your background is, how you ended up doing this.
Definitely. So my background is in local politics and campaigns. And I think like a lot of people out there, I woke up the day after Election Day 2016 with a result that I was not expecting and had not prepared for. And after taking a couple days to assess the situation, I wasn't working in politics at the time, but knew I needed to do something. And given that I had worked a lot with local candidates in the past and knew that Virginia was really going to be the big battleground state of 2017, I did not anticipate starting a whole new organization, but went looking for a group, this is kind of end of 2016, beginning of 2017, who could tell me, what were the competitive state legislative districts in Virginia. And maybe, talk a little bit about, it was still fairly early, but maybe some candidates who had already filed some paperwork to run. And that organization didn't exist at that point in time. And so, kind of the second question I had was, maybe some organization like Cook Political Report or Crystal Ball or 538, who has so much information about competitive congressional races, maybe they have a state legislative section that can, at the very least, tell me where the competitive districts are, and I can do some Googling to try to find out more information about candidates, and realize that even that information didn't exist. And so that's really how EveryDistrict got started, was when we realized, wow, there's no one out there who's really done this data work on competitive state legislative districts, and that seems like it would be a really useful resource if it did exist.
Yeah, that is a massive project. Did it seem daunting when you started?
So we kind of got started, and I should mention we have two other co-founders, and one of our other co-founders serves as our political director, and he really took on the bulk of this data work. We started with the 100 House of Delegate districts in Virginia, and that's where the formula for, we call it the EveryDistrict Legislative District Index, or LDI for short. And really all it is we take previous statewide and national election results broken down by state legislative districts and put it into a formula that gives us a number. If it's a positive number, that means the district leans Democratic. If it's a negative number, that means the district leans Republican. So, for example, if a district has a score of 10, that would mean that district votes for statewide Democrats by 10 points. And, starting with those first 100 districts didn't seem like such a big deal, but then when we decided to tackle the whole country, we kind of realized what we had gotten ourselves into, and it was quite a massive project.
Are there any places where there are surprises where the LDI doesn't really match, like who's holding the seat right now? I mean, I'm sure there's individual instances of that, but is there any sort of widespread places where that's happening?
Definitely. Well, this is a good point to mention that at the beginning of September, we're going to be releasing what we call our Purple States Report. And what this report does is really builds off the LDI scores that we developed in kind of late 2017, early 2018. We've refined them all based on the 2018 election results. And this Purple State Report really lays out what Democrats need to do over the next 15 months before November 2020 to really fundamentally alter the balance of power in the states. And what you'll see in that report is, Wisconsin stands out as a state where, right? I mean, last year, Democrats won back the governor's mansion, which was a huge victory, but we really didn't see those same type of gains at the state legislative level because Wisconsin is unfortunately such an effectively gerrymandered state that if we're going to win back the Wisconsin Senate and House, it involves competing in some really Republican territory, despite Wisconsin, generally being regarded as a blue state.
So you mentioned that one of the things then that you do is that you choose candidates that you think are in flippable districts and help them with financial support. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of it?
So, and this also was another product of the research that we did into Virginia in early 2017, was when we realized how much of a deficit Democrats faced in the Virginia State House, despite, Virginia being blue in its other statewide offices. The question we asked ourselves was, well, why? And we took a quick look at fundraising numbers in 2015, and what became very clear was that state legislative candidates on the ballot in Virginia in 2015, they just didn't have the money to run competitive campaigns. And so that's really how we kind of zeroed in on fundraising as the most impactful activity that we could do for candidates. And we have a specific fundraising model that's basically a peer-to-peer fundraising model. So we recruit people who we call fundraising champions, who are basically mini bundlers for state legislative candidates. And we have a program that we put all of our fundraising champions through. So whether you're someone who, has done fundraising before, and maybe you really don't need our assistance, all the way down to people who have never been involved in politics before, we work with everyone. And we work to tailor a fundraising program to meet your needs and how you'd like to best reach out to your donors. So maybe that's a small house party event, maybe it's an email campaign, and it doesn't really matter. I think a lot of people feel that unless they can get people in a room who will be able to write, 4 or 5 figure checks, that they can't be a fundraiser. But our goal is to make fundraising fun and effective for everyone. So if you're interested, you can visit everydistrict.us/fundraise to learn more and join our fundraising champion program.
And so when you do fundraising, is it for individual candidates? Is it for the candidates as a group? How does that work?
So it really depends, but most of our fundraising champions choose to raise for a slate of candidates. So that might be a group of our women candidates, that might be candidates running in a particular state. We've had some folks who've chosen to, read through the bios of different candidates on our website and pick out certain candidates who they identified with for different reasons. I think one reason that people have really enjoyed fundraising with us is that they've been able to work with a group of state legislative candidates who they feel they have some connection to, whether that's state-based or something about the bios of these candidates. And that really helps the folks that we work with write a really personal message to the family, friends, neighbors, coworkers that they're reaching out to and encouraging to support these candidates.
And so this part of what you're doing of the organization is a PAC. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? I'm trying to more and more help people understand the sort of landscape of all of these different organizations.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to describe it is as a PAC, that means we can fundraise and that we can work with candidates. I think the really complicated part about being a PAC, especially a PAC that works with state legislative candidates, is you have to know the campaign finance rules for every state that you're working in. And I think that's one reason why we see a lot of groups shy away from doing work at the state legislative level, because it can get really complicated really easily. But that's the benefit of working with an organization like us is, you don't have to worry about any of the compliance side of things because we've got that figured out on our end and make sure that, everything we're doing is in compliance with all of the various state regulations associated with the work that we're doing.
And so then EveryDistrict also has a 501c4 arm of it. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yes. 501c4 is a, completely separate entity from the work that EveryDistrict PAC does. So EveryDistrict Action Fund is a 501c4 organization that is focused on voting rights. And so that work takes a look at states that we call blue states. So these are states that are either controlled by Democrats or states that have a Republican governor, but a Democratic supermajority in the legislature. And we have evaluated these states, there are 17 in total, on various voting rights criteria. So everything from same-day registration, automatic voter registration, to the process by which you can get an absentee ballot, and created a scorecard that shows how these states rank on these various criteria. And what we've actually found is that there are a lot of states that rank quite poorly, despite the fact that, Democrats, and these are states, where Democrats hold levers of power, have been a party that's put voting rights front and center. I mean, H.R. 1 that was introduced in Congress after Democrats took back Congress in the midterms was focused on voting rights. And the states are a place where, H.R. 1 passed the House, but it's still sitting in the Senate, and I would not say it's likely that H.R. 1 will actually pass the Senate. But in these blue states, we actually have an opportunity to move the needle forward on voting rights and get to a place where we are actually making it as easy as possible for everyone to vote.
Yeah, so I live in one of those blue states. I live in Illinois, which is actually very, very blue at the state level, but it still has some things we could do better.
Yes, that's what we found in the work that we've been doing on this subject is that it's not so much coming from a place of that there isn't the desire to, make the voting process easier and more efficient for everyone. But I think what the scorecard really does is it makes it clear where states have failed and how activists can get involved to reach out to their legislators and encourage them to take action on, whatever area of the scorecard that particular state, could be doing better at this point in time.
So I noticed on the website that you have a number of states that are listed as target states, and two of those we've mentioned have 2019 elections, Virginia and Mississippi, but the rest are 2020. And so what is the plan then going into 2020 for what you want to do with, and this is back to the PAC side, of course, with these states and these candidates?
Yes. 2019 is a really important election year. This is an off election year, but there are still really important elections that are happening and where it's really important that we make sure, candidates in these states have support. So a lot of people are talking about Virginia. As I mentioned, Virginia was the first state we worked in 2017, and we're super excited to be able to be back there this year to finish the work that we started 2 years ago. Democrats only need to flip 4 seats to turn the Virginia legislature blue. And this is a state where it is definitely possible for Democrats to not only flip those 4 seats, but to win pretty commanding majorities in both chambers. And we're supporting some incumbent legislators who we worked with in 2017 who are facing competitive reelection campaigns, as well as candidates running in Republican-held House and Senate districts that we feel with the right investment, Democrats can flip in November. If you're interested in learning more about our work in Virginia, about getting involved to support candidates, we can help you donate to candidates, fundraise for candidates, and volunteer for candidates. And whether you live on the West Coast or in one of these districts in Virginia, we can get you connected to volunteer opportunities. Mississippi is another state that hasn't gotten as much attention in 2019, but it still has some important election opportunities there nonetheless. There is a competitive governor's race in Mississippi, and one interesting aspect of Mississippi election law that I learned earlier this year as we were gearing up for our work in Mississippi is that Mississippi basically has a state-level electoral college system. So in order to win statewide office in Mississippi, you not only have to win the popular vote, but you also have to win a majority of the vote in a majority of state house districts, which makes investing in state legislative candidates running in competitive state house districts all the more important in Mississippi, especially given that there is a competitive governor's race. Democrats also have an opportunity to break the supermajority in the Mississippi legislature by flipping 4 seats in the House and 2 seats in the Senate. And this is not only important for kind of the typical veto override policy power, but in Mississippi, budget bills need a 3/5 majority to pass. So if Democrats can break the supermajority in the legislature, they would actually have significant policy-making power and have a seat at the table in how dollars are spent in Mississippi. And then looking to 2020, and this is really what our Purple States report that's being released in early September will lay out, is where we see opportunities for Democrats to make gains in various states across the country in 2020, and exactly what Democrats need to do to make that happen.
I noticed that you have a number of partner organizations listed on the website as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with partners?
So we actually launched our partner program pretty recently. We, over the past 2 years, worked informally with a number of groups working at the state legislative level. And, we provide them with our data work as they were, thinking about making investments and how they could do that in a targeted way, and share information about, candidates who, based on their endorsement criteria, we thought might be a good fit for their organization. But earlier this year, we did a survey of the candidates we worked with in 2018. So in 2018, we worked in 5 states: Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And we endorsed 62 candidates across those 5 states. And we really wanted to get a sense of why our successful candidates were successful and why our unsuccessful candidates were unsuccessful, so we could do better in 2019 and 2020. And what we heard loud and clear from all of our candidates, and from our unsuccessful candidates in particular, was that they needed more resources. And so we knew we could do more to help them fill the gap. But we also knew that there were a bunch of organizations out there who provide support to candidates, and that we could do a better job of making the connection between the candidates that we were supporting and these other groups. So groups that are part of our partner network, agree to have information about them shared with the candidates who we endorse. And starting with the candidates that we're working with this year in 2019, we've provided them with our partners guide so they have more information about, groups that might be able to provide low-cost tech services, whether that's a free website or a cheaply built website, a candidate video, help with digital, to other groups who make endorsements and provide fundraising support, to groups that offer training. Really, if you're listening and you're a group that works with state legislative candidates, visit everydistrict.us. Send us an email. We'd love to partner with you.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we talk about?
The one thing I'll end on is, we've talked a lot about the states and what we're doing, and some of the, political opportunities to flip chambers. But I think it's also important to talk about why we should care about the states. In 2020, everyone is rightly focused on the presidential election, and it is so important that we defeat Donald Trump. We, of course, can't lose sight of that goal. But the states matter for a variety of reasons. There's the policy implications, which I think we saw really clearly earlier this year with the kind of so-called heartbeat bills that were being passed in Republican legislatures throughout the country, that we as Democrats, I think, too often look to the federal government for policy making. But really, there's so much policy making that happens in the states, and who controls state legislatures matters a great deal for that reason. But, even if you say, well, I still just want to focus my energy on federal races, I want to make sure Democrats hold on to Congress. I think the one big reason in particular why we all need to be concerned about the states in 2020 is redistricting. 2020 is a redistricting election. And if Democrats don't win back the states by 2020, we'll be cut out of the redistricting process. And, just a few months ago, the Supreme Court basically said, we're not going to intervene to undo partisan gerrymandering. In a majority of states across the country, it's the state legislators who will not only be drawing their lines, but drawing congressional lines as well. So in these key states that we're targeting in 2019 and 2020, who controls those states matters, not just for those state legislatures, but also for our congressional majority starting in 2022 and beyond.
All right. Well, that is certainly good incentive for us to focus on the state legislatures. So I'm so thrilled to hear about this work. I think it is really exciting, and I've got to check out that LDI because I think that is really, really cool. I can't believe you did all of that data crunching, but that's super impressive and I think incredibly helpful.
Thank you. Well, it was a massive project, but we put it out there because, we knew we were looking for this information and figured that other people might find it useful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and talk to me. And we will put links up on our website to your website so people can find all of that information.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.